Hi, I'm Pam. I work at Quality Sewing in the Kirkland, Washington store. Welcome to learn the unique features of your Bernina 790. Today we're going to be learning some of the advanced features of your Bernina sewing machine, and I hope that as you're learning you will stop, practice, and do what we've just done. It helps with the learning process. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is a quick review of the buttons on the sewing machine so that you can follow along with me more easily. On the Bernina 790 and many of the other machines, this is going to be your needle up and down, and this is your pattern began. When in Bernina language, just a quick thing, in Bernina language, the triangle means pattern. So when you see this triangle on the screen with the line at the top, that means pattern begin. This one means pattern end. If we're in the information button of the machine, you see all these other patterns, all these other triangles, that means pattern as well. So just remember, triangle means pattern. This is the tie-off feature of the machine. Here's your speed control, start, stop, press your foot up and down, thread cutting, and this is a reverse. These buttons plus these are personalizable, and you're going to learn how to do that to your liking on the machine. Also, let's go over here and do a quick review of these buttons. This is the home button. If you touch this, you get to say if you want to be a sewing machine or an embroidery machine. These are the settings. We'll come back to the settings and personalize your machine. With the onboard manual, if you have forgotten how to thread your machine, how to run the stitch regulator, if you've forgotten how to use a freehand system, you can come to this page, touch the thing that you need to learn about. Here is threading the upper thread. There's a video on there, so you'll be able to follow along with the video and rethread your machine. The next button down is the Creative Consultant. The Creative Consultant is a way, if you don't know all the stitches on the machine, you don't know what foot to use, you don't know exactly which stitch to pick, you can go into Creative Consultant, and what the screen is asking you is, do you have a light, medium, or heavyweight woven? Do you have jeans? Do you have a light, medium, or heavyweight knit? Or are you working with fur? Here is Velcro, here is leather and lace. So for this demonstration, touch the medium weight woven. So say we have a buttonhole we'd like to make in our medium weight woven. We're going to touch this screen, and this is all the information that you get. You get the stitch to choose, you get what size needle to use, the thread to use, it tells you what foot to use. Can it be a corded buttonhole? Yes or no? And this one can. Should you use stabilizer? Yes or no? And this one you should. So here's, when I hit the check mark, did you notice that it took me to the screen with all the settings that were on the Creative Consultant? So it's a shortcut. It shows you, here's the foot, the 3A, stitch length and stitch width. We're going to, when you probably learned in class 1 how to create buttonholes, but a quick review of that is you can go in here and say, I don't know how big my button is, so put your button here on the screen and adjust the knob until the yellow line is just outside the button. Now, it's reading that button at 23 millimeters and it's going to make it 25 millimeters, so there's room for the button to go through the buttonhole. Now, we can also say we've been to a vintage sewing store and we have bought a domed button, a beautiful domed button. In the past, we had to make the buttonhole longer for the button to go through the buttonhole. You can now come in and change a slit width, this distance in here, to make it wider. And look, as I'm adjusting it, it is getting wider. So now there's room for my beautiful vintage button to go through my buttonhole. Now, if I don't know what something does, I can ask the machine the question, what is that stitch used for? And it tells me right on the screen what it is used for. There are some really unusual stitches here in practical stitches at the end. I didn't know what these were for, so I asked the question, what is that stitch for? And it told me. And so I was able to go back and use it in the appropriate place. Now you saw me just accidentally hit the eco button. The eco button will turn the screen on and off. So when this eco is activated, the foot control is deactivated. So if you have to leave the room and you have a pet or a small child that puts their foot on the foot control when you're not around, don't worry, they won't be able to sew while you're out of the room. It reduces the power by 30% and it will remember all the settings. So if you've spent hours creating a personalized settings for some stitches that you're working with, if you hit the eco button, it will remember them even when you step away, and then when you turn it back on, it remembers exactly where you were and all of the changes that you've made. The clear button, you know what the clear button does. So I said we were going to spend some time talking about settings. Let's go back into settings and look at how we can personalize our sewing machine. Now, first thing is, let's talk about what these symbols mean. These are your sewing settings, your embroidery settings, your personalized settings. These are your sensors on and off. This is your audible settings, and this is your personalized sewing computer settings. So in here, the first one is tension, and as you might guess, this will adjust the overall tension on your sewing machine. 0 is neutral. If you increase the number, it increases the tension on your upper thread. This machine, all the tension is controlled with the upper thread adjustment. If you need to lower it, you can go here. 0 is neutral. This is your tie-off setting, so you can be on or off. I often say sometimes you feel like a knot, sometimes you don't. Here's on, here's off. So when you start sewing, it will make a tie-off so that as you sew, it is nice and complete. Here is the setting for your Bernina foot control. This is what the Bernina foot control looks like. Now, for years, Bernina has had this heel tap feature. And that is, you can see this little symbol down here, it's a needle up and down. If you've tapped that with your heel, it will raise and lower the needle. I have done that for decades. I can now go in here and say, I would really like it to cut the thread instead, and tie a knot or not, raise a foot or not. So your choices are heel tap, needle up and down, or personalize it to the way you want it to be. You can choose any, if you don't want the thread to cut, you just want the presser foot to come up at the end of the stitch, that's what you can select and heel tap, and it will do that instead. These are your stitches per minute. The machine stitches at 1,000 stitches a minute. However, you can reduce it. You can reduce it to whatever you want it to be. Now, I've set it to 345. At the upper end of my stitching, this is my speed control on the front of the machine. At the upper end of my stitching, it will only stitch 345 stitches per minute, considerably slower at the low end. I generally don't have to turn it down very much, but you can control that as well. And here's where we're going to do all of these stitches, or all of these buttons right here. This is your presser foot up and down. You can set this number from 0 up to 10. What that means is when your foot comes up, how high up do you want it to come? 2 is a default. And that's what I have my machine set up. It comes up just enough to clear the fabric without coming up too high, because as high as it comes up and goes down, that takes extra time for me. And sometimes I'm a speed demon. This is the thread cutting button here. So you could turn your foot control into the thread cutter, or you can just use this button. And when you use this button, do you just want it to cut thread? That's what it's set for now. Or you can say, I would like it to tie off as well. So if I choose tie off, you'll see a pattern of either the plus or straight line. I like the straight line tie off, and I can choose between 2 and 6 stitches for my tie off. I generally have mine set for 2, but you should practice and see how you like it. Now up here, you may have noticed I am going back and forth using the breadcrumbs. And so instead of going back and touching all of these and taking extra time, this is the trail of where I've been. I'm talking about thread cutting. We're talking about personalized settings inside of your sewing settings, inside of settings. So this is the reverse button, just like you would expect. If you touch the reverse button, the machine will back up. You can choose to say just back up, or Bernina has a wonderful feature called back step. So if I choose back step, the needle will go into the exact holes that it came out of as it was going forward. So here's an example of that. If you look at the top, you can see that the only way you can tell that there was a reverse button is this looks like a heavier stitch than this. This one, if you look closely, you can see it didn't quite line up as well. It's a little bit fuzzy. I love the back step feature, especially in decorative stitches, and I hope that you will try it. This is pattern end. Remember, triangle means pattern. Here's the button on the front of the machine. So when you hit pattern end, I used it here. I stopped the stitch at the end of the pattern. The machine did not go forward, it stopped exactly at the end. I can do that, but I can also say I'd like to tie a knot, and again you recognize these patterns of the plus mark or the straight line. You can choose either, again 2 to 6 stitches here, you can have the thread cut, you can raise the foot up and down. Now, when I deactivate these, they turn gray. If I activate them, they have a white line around them. So when you look at the screen, you know exactly what you've done. When you use your needle up and down feature, and when we go to the screen, I'll show you a little bit of the needle up and down, you can say to the machine, I would like the foot to not come up at all, to come up a little bit, or to come up a lot. So when you're doing applique work, for instance, or a curve, you can have when you stop, the foot will come up a little bit so you can adjust the fabric, and then when you press the foot control, it will go back down, and you can keep on sewing. Every time you stop, the needle will come up a little bit, and you can adjust the fabric and move on. If, however, you're working on something very, very precise, and you wish to use the freehand system and not the hover feature, you can choose don't come up at all, and then you're in control by using the freehand system, which I will show you a little bit more about later. Or you can have it come up a lot. That is what this symbol means. Not up at all, a little bit, or a lot. So we have covered how to personalize the machine to the way you like it. We're going to next talk about some of the decorative stitches on the machine. You covered some of the practical stitches in your first class, just how to navigate, how to get around. In class 1, you talked a little bit about how to navigate the stitches and choose them. And remember, you can, on each stitch, you can adjust the stitch width and length using these 2 knobs. Anything else, you have to give the machine information about what you want to do. So these are some of the symbols I talked about, the pattern symbols. How many times you want to stitch it, mirror image horizontally and vertically, extend the pattern. I hope that you'll take some time and play with those and see what those buttons do. And you can see here I could choose back step or reverse as part of the information for that individual stitch. Needle up and down is set here. So when your needle stops, you can have it stop in the down position or the up position. If you've chosen down and you get to the end of the seam, you can use this button to raise the needle up, and it just takes a half a stitch. I have often used that if I've really got to get to the exact end of a seam. I just press this button 2 or 3 times until the needle's at the exact point I want it to be to pivot. it's an exercise in precision. All right, we're going to talk about decorative stitches. There are many categories of decorative stitches. You can scroll through and see all the different categories. The first one is what I chose the symbol from, is florals. Then we have a multi-directional floral, which is this one. And what that means is that the feed dogs will move the fabric in a sideways motion, or actually in many different directions. 360 degrees, those feed dogs will move the fabric. So when you choose a stitch like this, look how big it is. It's so big it can't even show on the whole screen. It will stitch that way. I'm going to show you a multi-directional stitch for quilting in a little bit. You're going to just love. So the first thing that I would like to do is to use some of the information features. So we're going to go back into here. We're going to go to stitch 730, and it is this beautiful scallop stitch with a loop. I've used this many times. I love to quilt, and I'm not very good at free motion, so I like to use some of my decorative stitches instead, and this is one that I very much love. So wouldn't it be awesome if we could add a stitch to this and create our own stitches? Well, that's what we're going to do just by touching the combination button, which is right here. So I have activated the combination mode. I can go into this stitch and it shows on the screen. I can add it again. Now the second one that I added is highlighted. So that means I can make some changes to it. So let's go into the information button and let's mirror image it. Well, that looks great, but wouldn't it be better if we could see more of it? So let's touch the expand the screen button, and there you are. This is what the stitch looks like continually, and here's a larger version of it. Stop your machine now, practice that, because I'm going to show you another feature, and it's important to know how to do this. Combination off. Here. So I'm going to now add another stitch to, or open up combination. Here's my combination. Right after this one, I'm going to add another stitch. Well, it still is an interesting stitch. Here's what it would look like over here, but these lines no longer line up. So the second stitch is activated because it's blue. I'm going to move it over so that it lines up exactly where the first stitch began. Then I can highlight this one, move it down and over to the tip of the leaf. How's that for precision? And look at what a pretty stitch that it made. We just added one stitch. Easy to do. Now, I promised you that I would show you a stitch in the same stitch in multi-direction. So we're going to go to the 1600s in our menu. Now, an interesting thing about Bernina is that across all of the machines, the category numbers are the same. You may not have 1600 on your machine because it is, in fact, a multi-directional stitch. So the Bernina 790 Plus, the Bernina 880 Plus will have these multi-directional stitches. So, but you need to see this. So over to the 1600 menu, right here, multi-directional quilting stitches. We'll go to stitch 1615, right here. It's so big you can't even see it on the screen. Activate combination. Oop, there's my last ones. Let's get rid of those. And here's 1615 where I'm back here, so let's add 1615 back in. Let's add a second one. I'm going to do the very same thing I did with the first stitch. I'm going to go into the information button. I'm going to mirror image the second one. So I have this gorgeous loop, but look at the difference. This is the regular stitch that you'll find on most of the Berninas. This is the big giant multi-directional stitch. They're both gorgeous on a quilt, but this one is so very impressive. please take a few minutes, play with some of your stitches. I would like you to go in and be able to adjust the stitches so that they line up. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call the store. One more combination, still again in the 1600s, because I just want to show you, let's go in here and trash these so we can show you this next one. I'm going to just show you it, choosing some stitches that line up without making any changes at all, still make a beautiful stitch. So I'm going to go to stitch 1612, add that one. I'll go into stitch 1606, add that one, and add 1612 again. Let's expand it to look at the screen. This is what it looks like on the screen. This is how it stitches out. It's just a great way to use your big giant stitches to get an alternate look. You can do more than just one kind of stitch. All right. There is another fabulous stitch on the machine called a tapering stitch. And the tapering stitch, if you look at it, I'm going to go back in here and trash these because we're going to be using the tapering stitch. If you look at the tapering stitches, they have a point at the beginning and the end that are mitered. So if you're thinking about a situation where you have a square and you would like the corners to come together without crossing over, you can choose this mitered stitch. Look how these stitches just line up here. They're just so pretty. And again here, this is a mitered stitch. The points come together and it makes a beautiful stitch. This one is a 2.5 inch square, this one is a 3 inch square, this is a 4.5 inch square. I could applique, or I could use these in the embroidery process and do an initial in the middle of it. So play with these stitches. What we're going to do is this really awesome hexagon for practice. So we're going to choose stitch 1414. So we're going to practice with the tapering stitches. The tapering stitches offer you an opportunity to choose a stitch, and where there is an angle, you can create the stitch so that the lines don't cross. It makes this really awesome finish. So we're going to choose stitch first, 1414. Now when I look at this, I think that looks great, but it's these stitches that go into the hex are a little bit long in my opinion for the size hex that I'm using. So I'm going to make those be narrower. And closer together. So my stitch width is 4.5. I'm going to make it be narrower. Stitch width is 4.5. And my stitch length is 2.35. Well, that'd be a tiny little miter if we did it just like that. So let's go into the information button and give the machine information about what we want to do. So let's tell it first the shape that we're using. We're going to use this hexagon shape. Here are the shapes over here. You can choose any of these shapes. I'm going to choose a hexagon. I'm going to go back into the information button, and then I'm going to tell it here how long it should make the stitch. And the information that I'm giving it is how long it is from here to here. So I took out my millimeter ruler and I measured from here to here, and then I tried to do the calculation in my head and I couldn't. So I will tell you that if you have an Alexa in your sewing room, she can help you with the math. I asked her on my 2.5 inch hexagon how big I should make how many millimeters that was, and she said it was 70. So I set this for 70. I put my hexagon I put my hexagon under the needle. I lined it up so that the edge of the needle was right on the edge of the hexagon. It stitches forward, and look what it does. It stops at the end of the hexagon so that you can rotate and continue. It went so fast, and it does such a beautiful job. Please give this a try. All right, now we're going to learn this really amazing feature called Stitch Designer. You can choose any stitch and use your Stitch Designer feature. I'm just going to use a straight stitch. I touch the icon at the bottom. It's the squiggly line with the pencil, which means I'm going to draw my own stitch. I come to this screen. Here's my straight stitch. Look at this. I can add stitches to it. I just created this heart stitch. I can now go in and say, let's duplicate that. And the second one is highlighted, so I can mirror image it, and look what happens over here. Isn't that fun? Now, if I need to start over, I can hit this button. I can pan, if it's huge, I can pan up and down on the screen. I can move, and now I can just draw again. I will tell you that you can go stitch by, or point by point to make your stitch. See how I'm just point by point to create a wonderful stitch as well. I brought an example to show you. I made this cute little cup organizer. It had, I have a Westie dog at home. The fabric has a Westie dog and a Scotty dog on it. And this is just a little organizer where I keep my seam ripper, and my scissors are here. And I thought when I finished it, it would be so cute if I could add a Westie to the bottom of it. So I created this Westie stitch pattern. Now, I'm not going to kid you, this took some time. So be patient. Keep trying. It's just easy to start over and over again, create the stitch exactly the way you want it. The other remarkable thing that Bernina is known for is quilters love this feature. It's called the Bernina Stitch Regulator. The Bernina Stitch Regulator is this foot. It comes like this with 2 additional feet. And what it does, it has a little camera right here at the bottom of the stitch, or the bottom of the foot, that takes pictures of the fabric as you're moving it. It sends a signal through the wire to the needle to tell the needle how fast it should move so that your stitches are nice and even. If you need to change the foot on it before you put it on the machine, you can squeeze these buttons right here. The foot comes off. The new one just slides right on. And now you can choose either the closed toe, the open toe, or the echo foot. And the way it goes onto the machine is there is a port in the back that it plugs into. And now the stitch regulator is activated. Like all the other Bernina feet, the cone fits down in the hole on the foot, and this lever comes down and locks it in place. The screen has reminded me to lower the feed dogs because this is a free motion foot. Now, when we're in BSR, you get to choose if you want to have a straight stitch or a zigzag. I'm going to show you first straight stitch, and now the important thing, this is the important thing to learn about the stitch regulator. There are 2 different modes. Mode 1, the needle moves up and down constantly. So it turns on, the needle moves. And you can't see this, but I am not using the foot control. The speed is regulated. The speed is regulated by how fast I'm moving the fabric with my hands. So again, here's it. Needle starts instantly the minute I turn it on when I'm in mode 1. Look at this. If I'm in mode 2, and I turn it on, the red light comes on. That tells me the foot is active, but the needle doesn't move until I move the fabric. I recommend, if you're just starting with the stitch regulator, that you start in mode 2. It gives you some time to make decisions about where you want to go with your stitch, what design you want to stitch on your quilt. And then you can pause, touch the start-stop button, the needle comes down, you can take a breath, and then move on. I'm using the start-stop button today. If you use your foot control button, please remember when you use it that you are not regulating the speed of the stitch regulator by the foot control. We do get a little confused sometimes because we're used to pressing harder and making it go faster, and we forget to move the fabric faster. So in the beginning, if you'll start with the start-stop button until you can figure out how fast to move the fabric to make the BSR work the way you want it to, then you can switch to the foot control and have that be your on-off button instead of using this. One more thing, there's an alarm on and off. With the alarm on, if you go faster than the machine can process, you will hear a little audible squeal. And there's also a light here that flashes that says, slow down, slow down, slow down. And so I'm going to go really fast so you can see the red light, see how it flashes. I'm going faster than the machine can process, and if I'm looking down at my stitches, they're not as consistent as they are when I'm going at the speed that the machine can process. So try it both ways. Try it with the alarm on, off, and just have some fun with stitch regulator. Now, that pretty much concludes the unique features that I have decided to teach you today. I do hope that you will visit the stores if you have questions. If you live outside of the Puget Sound area and you have questions, you can contact us through our online chat system on www.qualitysewing.com, and they will be happy to help you. And of course, I just hope you have so much fun with it. Now, I think it would be really awesome if you would also take a few minutes and like us on Facebook so that you can post some of the creative things that you do. And I think you should go onto Instagram and give your machine a hug, since you can't hug anybody else right now, and post that to Instagram. Anyway, we're passionate about sewing at Quality Sewing, and we hope so much that you love your machine as much as we want you to. Call us. Have fun.